sort of end in itself, but actually for impact. So we are excited to have Paul and Bradon together to really talk and exemplify an example of making sort of an impact. We're going to help you.
I think a good entry to that is our conversation about most always I am looking to tell a random story. It's a huge part of the work, the randomness. And so I will almost never interview somebody who comes up to me to ask for a photo or to tell me they love humans in New York. They're great conversations. I love them. But, or even more like I have a story to tell because I want to maintain the randomness. But when I came here on like the third day, I went to the University of Accra, and as soon as I stepped out of the car, Paul, I can still see him in my head, was walking in front of me with his camera. He was like following somebody working a job, and then he kind of looked at me like that, and he came up to me and he said that he had seen me do an interview on Creative Live. And he started going on and on about how he'd watched every single video. He was more interested in Creative Live than me. I remember that. How he watched every single video on Creative Live because the guy who started that, Chase Jarvis, is a friend of mine. And so I was mainly excited to tell my friend Chase that I met somebody who watched every single one of his videos. And it was a very nice, interaction. But then I said thank you, and then I went on to do my work, and I interviewed a few people on the campus. But then something, it's kind of stuck in my head. And I was like, you know what? This guy was so nice. He wanted to take a picture of me. He was so nice. He was so eager. He was another photographer. I'm going to do an interview with him. And my interpreter, Werke, also my friend, said, okay, we can find him. And she texted somebody who she knew, who knew Paul. And then he came back, and I sat down with him, and I did an interview, and I learned that he was a single father providing for his daughter and attempting to be a photographer in Ghana while doing that. And all of the struggles and barriers that were in his way because Ghana didn't really have a culture of photography yet. There wasn't as much of a market up for it. People didn't value photography. It was very difficult to learn about it. There weren't many resources. There wasn't a community. So that's why he was doing all of his learning remotely from these videos on the internet. And naturally, having moved to New York to be a photographer, not knowing anybody, not having anything myself, I identified, very closely with that story. And at the end came the moment that happens every time I interview an artist, where we'll talk all about the difficulties of being an artist, because that's what I'm more interested in, the personal story, not the art itself, the story of struggle and pain that anybody can connect with. And then at the end, there's always a moment where they say, well, let me show you my art. And that moment's always a little nerve-wracking for me because I never know how the art's going to look. And no matter what, I want to be supportive. Because one thing I say is like today's bad artist is tomorrow's good artist. It's like you become a great artist by being a bad artist for a continued period of time. Another reason why it's so important to judge yourself by the work and not the output, because the only way to get through the valley of badness that everybody has to go through is just repetition and doing it over and over and over again. So I never want to discourage an artist, no matter how undeveloped their work is. And so I prepared myself to just compliment him no matter what I saw. But he opened his laptop, and they were some of the most beautiful photos I'd ever seen. Just immense talent. And it kind of kicked my gear up to a new level of interest. What are you doing? What are your plans? And he told me that he had applied for a scholarship at the International Center of Photography in New York. And he had only been giving a half scholarship, and the other half might as well have been $2 million. It was so much money. And so I kind of made I asked him, if you had the full scholarship, would you be able to go? And he said yes. And so I left and I figured it out, and that was the beginning.
So wonderful story, and I have to remark, while I'm not a photographer, that that's how I met Paul. Also in 2018, through his extraordinary photography, he actually took photos of me. And then you weren't in photography school; you hadn't yet met Brandon. So, Paul, tell us about you meet Brandon, and then how do we get here?
Thank you. It's been a long journey. So when I met Brandon, right, and this is where we are, right in, I think, Sabaho. That's where we were, and Brandon followed me on Instagram. At that time, I had 2,313 followers. I remember very well. And he followed me, and that's when things became real. And he gave me his email address and a phone number, and he supported me immensely, to get visa to go to New York. And when I went to New York, a typical Ghanaian mindset, I was like, okay, thank you, I'm here, right? I'm in America, land of dreams, right? I'm gonna make it. If I can make it in New York, I can make it everywhere. Right? So there he was in Japan. He texted me and he said, "Hey, dude, if you need anything, you can go home. To my wife will support you. Let me know whatever you need." And I was like, "Okay, bye, sure, thank you. I'm in New York." Little did I know that New York is the toughest place. Right, so I was in school, first week in school, excited, like a kid in a candy shop. And when he came, he asked us to go for a long walk. That was the beginning of our many long walks. And he kind of asked me what's my trajectory, what I wanted to do. And honestly, I wasn't planning to, learn from him in any way because, typical photojournalism. I was in the school, one of the best schools in the world, photojournalism, documentary filmmaking, and I was going to write it out, like, become a photographer. And I realized first month in school, coupled with racism and other things, I realized that, the things they teach us in school was different, right? It was the rigid box. So our friendship grew. From time to time, we go out to eat Caesar salad, our favorite steaks, and I mean that was good, right? Just hanging out with him, knowing his work, knowing the people he interview, and he deeply cared for people, right? Drew us together, and I think one of the common thread between us is that how we care about others, right? And I'm sure everybody listened to him, and that is the embodiment of him. And yesterday, 3 days ago, I said he's one of the few people I'm sure who's a celebrity don't have drama behind the scene, right? This is who he is, right? Behind the scenes, in front of the scenes. I'm sure, and again, he doesn't talk much about the behind the scenes. I have had first experience, and I think he influenced me a lot, right? Yes, I care about people, but to have somebody like him, successful, young, and still humble, still empathetic, still doing the work. I trust me. I'm an artist, right? But I would not. I don't think I'm there yet, where I wake up every morning, even when you're successful, to go out there and interview people and get rejection and still continue to do the things. And sometimes the stories are good, sometimes the stories are not. And his creative writing, I became a better writer by hanging out with him. And one thing led to the other, piqued interest in filmmaking. And I didn't expect him to be in my school, visit me in school. Right? I wanted to be the normal cool kid, but he visited my school and everything changed. And everybody got to know I know him. And we became best of friends. I've learned a lot from him as an artist, as a brother, as a father, how he treats his kids, how he made me first told my daughter I love her. I didn't know how to do that, right? Every time I hang out with him, he would be FaceTiming the daughter. It's like, I love you, Savannah. And I was like, okay, so Ella, let's do it. And well, Ella, it took 1 year for Ella to respond back. 1 year, African fathers don't say I love you that much. Granddad never told me that. So these are some of the influences I've had from him. Sometimes people do not know they can't exist basically because of him. So
I think with that, what I'm learning the trick is turn yours off while I'm talking for a second. Yeah. So 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 you're in New York, right? You have a role model, a sponsor, a mentor while you're there. You're like, I'm in New York, I made it. What makes you decide that you are interested in coming back and returning home, right? When did you realize it's something you were interested in doing, and then how did you develop sort of tell us how you came to a place where that actually was a reality?
you know, um, some of my friends here. Today is a wonderful day. Yesterday and today, I'm very grateful. Right, good, the very good friends I started with, photographers I started with. Most of them are here, and I'm them here. When I went back to when I was in New York, I took 42 courses in school. I was going to school every weekend, every single day, right, and still had time. But because I was grateful to be in the best, one of the best schools, right, and I've been watching YouTube tutorials of some of these artists, right, Brandon on Creative Life, and to be in such position of privilege, I wanted to share. It's easy to become a top photographer over nothing, right? How strong is the ecosystem here? In New York, you can have a gallery show, 15 to 20, hundreds of them every weekend, right? You can have photographers gathering together. My school had everything, top of the line equipment, um, lectures from National Geographic, and other things. But one of the things which struck me most was one day when my lecturer told me that he asked me to line up my pictures on the table. And she said, I don't want to see work from Ghana. This is work from Africa. She especially said that. Go to show me work from New York. And it upset me because like these are works, and these are some of the works which have been in exhibition today. And I realized that, no matter how good I am in the school, I will never fit here because my work is not accepted much here. They wanted to see a narrative which has been enforced for years and years. So my pictures, which immediately she thought that, these pictures are propaganda and poverty pictures, but that narrative was upsetting, right? So in a nutshell, hanging out with Brandon was infectious, right? Always want to help another person. So I started, I worked with him, and he used to give me stipends, right? Yeah, big brother, and stipends to survive in New York. And I used to use the money to buy books. So I started with African photo books only. All my dream was to get African photo books, bring them, get a small room, and fill them up, share with photographers here, do workshops, bring some of the people here. I was not planning to come back. See, money, right? New York is great. The money was good, but then always my end game was to come back at some point to build this, and Brandon made it shorter. And yeah, that's how I think.
So, all right. So, Brandon, we can go back to you and thinking about what he said, Brandon making it shorter. Tell us about how you moved to a space where you hear about Paul's vision, you realize what he's trying to do. What did you what resonated with you about what he was trying to do that you were like, you know what, let's make this happen?
I don't know if we ever talked about this. He was a little strategic about it too. He would whip out his notepad when we were hanging out and start drawing pictures of the library. Oh, what are you doing? I'm dreaming. One day I'm going to figure out how to go back to Ghana and go, okay. But again, remember, I don't know if we ever talked about that. You remember that? Paul, what are you doing over there? Nothing. I'm just designing a library. And one day I don't know how I'm going to get the money that I need. For one day I'm going to bring my 30,000 books back to. But remember, I was always very, very careful only telling random stories. So it was a big it was a big barrier for me to get over to tell the story for somebody that I had become so close to. But then I think was it after the health scare that I did it, or was it before that? Um,
I think with the conversation started went on vacation.
yeah, yeah. So but I decided because normally it always starts with a story. Like it doesn't start with somebody that I want to help. In fact, it's only done that twice, and it was and Paul was one of those because it's so difficult to make a story work on social media. Like the art of telling a long form story on social media, it's very, very, very difficult to make people stop and read giant blocks of text. Like when I'm writing a long form story, every single post, I can tell you, in maximum Instagram post is 2,200 characters. When you're reading a long form story on Humans of New York, every post will be over 2190. Like I'm shaving off letters and syllables. Like I would spend hour just shaving off syllables of each chapter at the very end, like just to make it fit. And it's very difficult to get people who have been trained to scroll, absorb something for 10 seconds, like it, scroll, to stop. And the story, and so I've always waited for those perfect stories to tell that fit that category. And the process of starting with a person that you want to help and then figuring out how to make their story, which I don't know fully yet, that for is a very, very big bite to chew off, which I explained to him. But then I decided to do it one day, and it was tough. It took a long time.
6 months.
You know better than me. It took a long time to figure out the arrangement. The way and yeah, we finally we did it, and it was beautiful.
So, were you nervous about Paul pulling it off? Were you like, what were some sort of what did you expect as you went on to engage in this process of crafting the story?
I was nervous about readership. Like if you read the long form stories of Humans of New York, they're like like this person robbed a bank, or this person was running, literally escaped from jail and was running for the prison, like very high stakes. Paul was a quieter story. It was about a father trying to provide for his daughter that wanted to be a photographer. It's an exciting story, but again, on social media, the type of story that will really draw people out of their news feeds to pay attention, a lot of times there needs to be some very baked in, some high baked in stakes. So making a quieter story like that work was my main worry. And then I think you asked afterwards, I was less worried about Paul, because and one thing that I was thinking about when we were talking about how Paul met. Like when I met Paul, you had 2,000 Instagram followers. He had made very little money being a photographer, but he had funded with that money trips to Kenya, he had gone out of his way to do these massive projects, again, focusing on the work and without thinking that anything would come of it. And it was because he did that when he did find himself in front of me, I was so amazed, and I was able to notice something about Paul that far rarer than talent is drive. Is somebody who is going to drive, get past obstacles, not quit when it gets tough, and he had already demonstrated that. Then he comes to New York, he's working harder than anybody in his class, he is collecting 30,000 books without anybody watching him to. And so it's like, probably the thing I was worried least about was Paul being able to get the ball, the American football analogy is probably not going to land too well here. Was to carry the torch and finish the job.
So it sounds like Paul is really prepared for the opportunity. So Paul, it goes viral. Now you're getting thousands of followers for the second time, right? How do you handle sort of that moment?
So, a little bit of context. So, I've been working with Brandon. We've been working behind the scenes. Stephanie's story raised 2.5 million, book deals, and all that. And when you do that with him for a long time, right, you don't feel yours. Like I didn't feel it. Like because the trajectory in the beginning was like the story and raising the money. Right? So him, because I was so much with him, and I've been there before. No, thank you. Okay, I didn't really pay attention much to how it went because Brandon invited me. We've been doing the story, trying to write the story for 6 months, right? Still working on other people's story, and brought me to Atlanta. At that time, he was there, and come to New York. We would hang out, ask me questions. It was one of the most intense time of our friendship, right? And once we work together, sometimes we ask questions, and I'm like, is it for the interview, like for the thing, or it's like you asking me questions? And I was very sensitive to that, to be honest with you, because this is where I'm a father, right? Being away from my daughter, who's happened to be here, and trying to tell the story again was I was sensitive to it, but the thing was the greater of good. And when the story happened, we were in Atlanta and then shared the story. I didn't feel anything. We're producing it together. But what happened was when the media attention came through, I remember going to Brandon's study room to do my first interview on Joy FM, and Brandon was listening to me, right? And he gave me so much confidence, right? He trusted me. He was my cheerleader, like support 100%, right? And he gave me so much confidence and knowing that he was there for me throughout the process. And man, I was sometimes worried, would I be able to pull it off? And if you have any friend who is so committed to such a project as Brandon, sometimes we'll be on the Zoom call and then or FaceTime and he'll puff me up. Like, so much. It's like, Paul, this is going to be great, and it was so amazing to have him. And I think today, when we got from the airport, he didn't go to the hotel. He said, I want to see the place. Right? He came here and his reaction was everything to me. To have, supporting and believing in me and coming to see what we've done in the last 10 months was everything. So afterwards, and I'll be honest with everybody over here, right? The fame that comes along with it is different. So I shut everything down. When I got to Ghana in last year, exactly December 28th, I shut everything down. I wasn't going to do any media, right? The work was my goal. Hanging out with my daughter was my goal. And not trying to fake things up, like, all's good. I was, how do I say it? I was really nervous. Will I be able to pull this out? I was alone. There was no team member, right? To hire 13 people to lead. When we got this building, it was just only this building, right? So we're going to start small. I have to start a board membership. I have to be accountable to them. I have to set them so that I'll be accountable to them. To build all these things was scary, But I think that God is faithful, right? And I've had the most incredible team with me day and night. We fought, we've cried, we've done everything, and have we currently with the numbers we have 162 people we've hired to work as amazing workers. So we've provided jobs as well for them. And today we have a photo library, the first in Africa. We have the first photo gallery in Africa as well. We have Story Lab. We have a huge compound for movie screening. We have a compound for artists to come and work. And actually our internet is free. We have a kitchen. We have 3 classrooms. We have a studio, we have a production room. So I spent this 1 year to build. And as Brandon said, I don't like the noise. I want to focus, right? I don't want to be on the TV. I don't, because I think it also comes with the infection from Brandon, right? Brandon always want to be behind the scene and let the work do the work, right? If the work is not good, there's no noise about it. If the work is good, it's good. And I learned some of these things from him, how he's quiet behind the scene and he doesn't talk a lot about some of the things. If you mention numbers, he becomes uncomfortable. And I think that's what propelled me. And also he helped me. Before the Humans of New York story, right? When we will go out, we will go to Manhattan, walk all the way to Maryville, some of these people you've interviewed. And he would teach me how to deal with the fame. If you walk to Brandon, 5 seconds, he will switch the script. He would make it about you rather than him, right? He would not absorb the appellation and the fame. He would just care deeply about the person, and he taught me that well. So sometimes I think when I go Delta Line, sometimes I get people in the beginning, and now sometimes people reach out to me, oh my God, is that you? And I go Brandon style.
To just see the recounting of what Decon is in its fullness. Archiving is really important, right? So one of the first exhibitions here was Bob Pixel's, where the late Bob Pixel, amazing photographer, in this space provided a place for his archives, right, to go. And that's really incredible, and has continued through the new exhibit and collaboration. So this is really the beginning of something that's going to be incredible and amazing. I'm really honored to be a part of it, Paul. So really huge congratulations. One thing that you talking about, sort of the fame, or sort of the when people get to know about what you're doing, it makes me think about criticism, right, and critique, and how you all both end up having to engage with potential criticisms about your approach. So this is a question for both of you all. How are you, or do you, engage with the critiques and criticisms around what you're building or what you've built?
Yeah. I mean, it was very. Somebody said to me, and I think it's true, that whether you're somebody with 20 million followers reading 10,000 negative comments about something you posted, or whether you're a 16-year-old girl reading one mean thing that your classmate said, like, the feeling is as intense in both ways. It's just because you kind of adjust as you get bigger. And so, I think for me, the first time I ever read a negative comment, I'll never forget it. It was on an article about me, and somebody wrote something nasty. And I remember I spent so much time trying to change their mind. Like, no, I'm not like that. Like, I promise. Like, let's go get lunch. Let's get coffee. Like, and I mean, you one of the first rules of criticism on the internet: never respond. Like, never respond, because it's not about. It's when somebody not always. Sometimes it's very thoughtful, but a lot of times. Whether somebody's praising you a lot, or whether somebody's critiquing you a lot. A lot of times the internet interaction can be more about them than it is about you. Which I think I learned by at first trying to change the person's mind. It wasn't about the truth. It was about them having some sort of leverage over you and you being on the defensive. And so once I learned that, I just kind of, let the criticism come in. And I would think it would always bother me at first, when sometimes it would be 10,000 word think pieces in the New Yorker. Sometimes it would be an article calling me racist, and it wasn't because of anything racist I did. It was about the systemic nature of my work and me just being a white male, and therefore I cannot possibly take pictures of people in other countries without playing into racism, and there'd be a 10,000 word think piece that would have 100,000 shares on Facebook. Literally, that's not an exaggeration. There's an article like that had 100,000, and just the mind, the psychological, feeling of all of these people, that being their lens into you, was just very, very overwhelming. And eventually it just got to the point again. So much of the theme of this is just recentering things into what you can control. Is thinking very hard. It's like doing something is like a blanket. If you're trying to do something big, it's going to be like sleeping and you're having a blanket that's a little bit too small for you. And if you pull up the blanket so that it covers your head and appeases those critics, then your feet are going to be exposed. And then those critics are going to come in. And so it's about asking yourself the kind of work that you want to do and the life that you want to live, and trying to follow your code and be your own critic. And sometimes it is learning from the critiques of other people. It's feeling that emotional pain, like they don't know me, and then letting the emotions wear off and thinking, well, okay, maybe I could do things a little bit differently. And that's happened. I have, responded. I don't respond. When I say don't respond to criticism, I mean don't fight it. Don't. But yeah, some of the most painful critiques, I would say, has altered my work some. As I've gotten older. But I think I've gotten to the point now where I've thought about it so much. I even asked AI to criticize me recently. I said, critique humans of New York. Maybe there's something I haven't heard. You know what I mean? And nope, same old criticism. I've gotten to the point where the blanket's exactly where I want it to be. And I know the criticism that I'm going to get. And I know if I fix that criticism, what new criticism will come up. And this is the work that I want to be doing. And so that's been my journey with it over 13 years.
When I decided to take this path to build an ecosystem, I say I'm helping to build an ecosystem in Ghana and in Africa. Immediately you put yourself out there, right? My own best friend, who's a photographer, when my story was shared on Humans of New York, came at me, right, and said terrible things to me. People think that, after you featured on Humans of New York and everything, and, you've been successful and everything. I've lost 7 friends in the process. Yeah, they don't talk to me again. But why? I don't know. Some of them I know, oh, why did you talk about Ghana photography in a negative way, blah, blah, blah. It comes off some way. But to be honest with you, listen, the last 1 year, I've been here in Ghana trying to take care of my daughter, just 2 of us in the house. I'm trying to build this. Sometimes when we started, my office was right at the veranda, no air condition, trying to hire people. I'm a photographer and a filmmaker, right? I'm an artist. I'm not a business major. I'm learning. Sometimes, to be honest with you, in the night, once we close from here, I'm on YouTube. Harvard Business Review, I've subscribed to it, and I'm learning how to lead, how to hire the right way, how to build this space in sustainability. I've never been on a board before. So I have to learn what to even talk to my board. One of my board members is here, and I'm learning. So why will I pay much attention to those criticisms? So what I do is, I don't care, right? I learn from them. I take those things. Here is a platform that invites some of the photographers and, to listen to them and build the space. If my daughter criticizes me, which she does, she's my chief advisor. When I get home, she's like, why would you let Emma go? Right? So I care about, right? I cannot control everything. I can only do within my heart is pure. I love the Lord. my heart is pure towards everyone as much as possible, and yeah, I learn from the criticism, and I try to make myself better.
We're our own worst critics. I don't know if you guys are anything like me. Like I'm so hard on myself. Like a year ago, 2 years ago, and you know what's helped me like learn or helped me with that is the knowledge that when you were younger and you made those mistakes, you were still trying your hardest with the information you had then. You were just like, and that's the thing. It's like, God dang it, I messed up. But you know, at the time, speaking the language I knew then and having the information I had then, I was trying my hardest. And the the mistakes that I made were because I hadn't learned the lessons that I would learn by making those mistakes later. And I think that's the way that I found to give myself the most grace, and it's just to trust even.
Right, to understand that you did the best you could at the time with the information you had. So I think that's really important. One thing that you mentioned, Paul, that I actually thought about for both of you all, as we're thinking about how we do storytelling for good, and not just that, how we become successful at it, is that both of you all are photographers that have turned into much more than that. So, to be a successful photographer, do you have to also learn to wear these hats in the ways that you all have as board chairman, as entrepreneur, as leader, right? Is that a necessary requisite part of that? It just seems so beyond the art that I'm curious about your perspectives on this.
Your trajectory and what you want to do, what impact you want to make, right? One of the things which was refreshing to hear from a senior brother like Brandon when after he months of New York, and I was doing the interview and he was all in and setting up board and all that, and he said, "You know what? I think one day you're going to teach me some of these things. You're going to be better than me in some of these things. These areas I'm not good at, or in some of this aspect, you know." And for me, also being with him, I used to suck at writing. I wasn't good. I mean, it's an adage or funny thing that photographers don't write, right? But to see him do it inspired me to do more, to write, right? I write my speech, try to write all these things. So it depends on the trajectory and where you want to go. The hat to be a CEO and the founder of Decan has nothing to do much of my photography practice, right? Right now, I'm the curator of the gallery. I have to figure that out myself. The story lab, I'm the chief engineer over there as well, and it depends where you want to be and what it takes for you to get there. What is success? I'm a successful person. I am, because the things that I deem successful, to me, that's it, right? I'm a father. My daughter is here, 12 years old. She's doing incredible things in school. These are some of the things, right? I don't need an award. One day I went to Brandon's study room and one of the awards was used to chalk something. I said, "Oh my goodness, this is like Oscar in writing, Oscar in advertising, and this is, and so you use this to what? To pack, to hold. Oh my goodness. So, it depends on what you mean. And I worked with him several times and be inviting emails upon emails of awards, and he would never reply. He would never reply. And people reach out to him for several things and he would never reply. He would even care about it because it's every single day going through the street, telling people story, making the real impact what the story would do. So for me today, what I care about is the next fellowship, the education we're going to teach over here. Don't run away. Actually, Sally is on our board of advisors for education as well. You surround yourself with the smartest people, then you don't know where to go. Sally is a professor in Northwestern University. Exactly, that's what I'm doing. To bring people in to do the things. So
He's smart. He's putting this on camera. So I want to ask a bit more of I appreciate the inspiration and the encouragement, but I want to go a little step further in thinking about what my students, I think, in Chicago would probably say to some of this, which is, okay, how do we survive? How do we eat? How do we sustain this, right? in many ways, somehow you moved to New York and it worked out for you, and then you met him and it was benevolent and became helpful in that way. But how do we actually sustain what we're doing so that we can be photographers and artists? And, you're doing the work, but it's not working, it's not feeding you, right? Like, what do you do? How do you sustain this work?
I mean, look, it's difficult. It's it's the holy grail, and the reason it is difficult is because it's the holy grail. Like whenever it's like a job, it's the economy, it's supply and demand. Whenever you have a job that everybody wants, that's going to be the most difficult job to have because there's the most people competing to do it. And what I say is the holy grail, it's living a life where you're doing exactly the work that you have the freedom to do exactly the work that you want to be doing every single day. And that is something that's extremely hard to achieve because everybody is trying to achieve it. And I think so many people think that, or they use following their dreams as an excuse to not work hard. Met these people in New York. They're at the bar every night. Oh, I'm a photographer. Oh, I'm this. I'm that. They're using following their dreams as an excuse to not work hard, when in reality, following your dreams correctly is harder work than anything because it's the most competitive lane. With the goal being to get enough finance. The goal isn't 1 million followers. The goal isn't $1 million. The goal is to make enough that you can do what you want to do all day long. That's the sweet spot. Again, centering things back in the work. That's how you stay sane. That's how you stay healthy. And that's how you stay grateful, is not asking more from life than the ability to do the work that you want to do. Not do whatever you want to do. Do the work that you want to do and work very hard at it. Yeah.
You want to add something? Okay.
When I met you, Michael Homan and other people who have worked before you said in the beginning you used to reject jobs, right? Samsung wanted to pay you huge millions of dollars just to post, right? And we're talking about sustainability, right? And what was that point where you were broke, right? You were living in Brooklyn, right? You started the Humans of New York, but one other thing I wanted to know, I'm not the partner, but I'm just asking, was today where I am, like rejecting a job, right, is painful. I got a job offer to go back to New York to do it, but you have to choose between pecan and that. So what was your drive for rejecting these jobs in the early stages where these monies were millions of dollars, right? And you rejected them. So in terms of sustainability, what would you advise a young photographer in terms of surviving it?
Again, it's difficult. This is one thing where no one piece of advice is going to fit every single person. So it's like I'm hesitant. Everybody's got to figure out their own thing, and Humans of New York is a very unique beast. And so the Humans of New York roadmap is not going to fit every single person. But what I did for the beginning is I realized that the power that was going to lead me to have freedom was going to be the size of my audience. I realized that. And in the beginning, as long as I was eating 2 peanut butter jelly sandwiches a day, and I was sleeping on a floor in a room, I had no furniture. It was a mattress on the floor for the first several months of Humans of New York. I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor, nothing on the walls, eating 2 meals a day. So I struggled, and when it started growing, as soon as I had just enough money to pay my rent and eat, I would never make a decision where I would take $1 in order to give my audience something they didn't want, because I always prioritize the audience over anything. And I've never taken $1, even 13 years later. It's not that I was turning down work. I was turning down people trying to give me money to post things that they wanted me to post. That was the difference. And so now, 13 years later, when a 7,000 word story comes on the news feed, for maybe the only account on social media, people will stop and read it because for 13 years, Humans of New York has never given them something that they didn't want to see and that I didn't work extremely hard on. And so, because I did that, because I turned down the easy money early and bit the bullet, the audience grew to a certain point that I could make more than enough money doing things my way. Again, every situation is different, and like in the beginning, you got to do what you got to do. Never apologize for doing. I was single at the time. I was young. I didn't have many needs. I didn't have a mortgage. Everybody's situation is different, so never feel guilty for doing what you got to do. But that's what I did at the time.
That's important for people to acknowledge as well as they're making decisions about what to do.
Yeah, it's just like I see it all the time on social media. Just by speaks, the moment people have an audience, they just try to monetize it maximum, and then they lose their audience. Don't make that mistake.
Key advice. I have two more questions before we move to Q&A. Paul, I want to ask you the way that I asked Brandon earlier. What are you sort of most afraid of? What are you most concerned about regarding sort of the moment after this?
To be honest with you, most of the times I start from home. My dad taught me this in a hard way that you cannot change the world without taking care of your home. That's the most important thing to me, right? The thought of my home scares me a lot. Like, will I be able to do this and still be that possible? Right? Will I be able to do this and still be at home? Right? My daughter has suffered a lot because of my struggles. I owe her a lot. The last 3 months, 10 months, summer she came to work here. Right? She wanted to be the first board chair, a youngest board chair here, and some of these things scares me sometimes. Right? But outside that, what scares me most is the execution. Right? The execution. I have the ideas, the thought. Right? How do I execute them? The last 10 months has been hiring right, fine. Hiring slow, firing right. And even now, we're recruiting for several roles here. So look it out on our social media platforms if you want to work with us. With us as well. That scares me most, and the sustainability. Because my goal is not to be here for the rest of my life. I'm not building the camp for my family. None of my family has anything to do with it in terms of it's a non-profit, right? At some point, I'll step down for the vision to continue. So how do you build sustainability plan? How do you build sustainability in terms of team members? So my team members, I'm sorry, I'm so hard on you because of some of these things, right? Because the system has to work with or without points. So sometimes I stay home and see how the place run. I have my wonderful executive assistant sitting on the first row, and I'm constantly pushing her to grow, right? To instill the vision in her and in the team and see how it grows. So if I'm able to build a system that runs, which provide support, education for people in Africa, that's my goal.
So this is a good segue to thinking about really your hopes, Brandon, for how you think about developing or adding to the development of decon in any way. And you too, Paul, in terms of what you really envision, what you want people to take away from this, right? Even from this event. One thing that I think is important to sort of also think about is that during your launch, you said you wanted to ensure that you had an event about stories for good. Decon by itself is a place that archives photos and has places where people can take photography and has a library, but you also thought it was important that specifically people understand that part of that is doing good, right? Which goes beyond taking photos and telling stories, right? So can you just leave us with what you want people to take away from the launch of inaugural series of Stories for Good, and then maybe share a little bit about how you're hoping that they can be a part of continuing this legacy, both of you all.
So I could start first. So don't feel bad. The program is about to end, but then we'll be coming back again next year. We had an initial conversation. We trying to have a fellowship for Brandon. He can run away. So we're going to do that next year. So keep clapping for him. Yeah, he can run away from that next
All right, this is another example of Paul sketching a library in front of him. We're on the way home from the airport, all right? He's like, Brandon, can you come back next year and teach a class? And I was like, oh, Paul, I'm not, I'm really busy, and he goes, it doesn't matter, just any time, just it's something you can do, right? Just need a yes. I'm like, yes. Now, every time he's been on stage, he said, Bradon Stanton has committed to coming and teaching a course next year. So he's smart. It's not all idealism. It's smart. It's like a bomb. Yeah.
Don't you love me for that? So back to your thing, your question. What we take away from this is I'm trying to build something together with you all. This is not about Pondence. This is about all of us having a place like this. I'm holding my tears because for the first time, this is a place where the whole place is filled. I've envisioned this for a long time. Brandon talking about sketches, right? I'm not an architect, right? But the building over here was somebody's house. We converted the classroom, the living room into a classroom. We converted the bedrooms into the story lab. We converted the garage and the living room into the gallery. We converted the bedrooms into classrooms. We converted the master bedroom into the library, right? And this is what I've envisioned. Again, this is a platform. It would be sad that I built this place and it's all about Pondence and Deacon. Nana Are is here. He has a lot of events. This place is yours. Every single person over here can have a place here where you can host event. You can come here. The Wi-Fi is free. You can come here any single day to come and work. We're trying to figure out the food aspect of it, where you can come get snacks and sit here and work. The library is for you. The gallery is for you. You're sitting at the movie screening center, right? This is movie screen right here. Go produce the body of work. Go produce the film, and we'll do it. It's not complicated, right? There's no red tape. There's no gatekeepers over here. And so my envision that Africans will have their own place, a place that we can call our own. This place is literally designed like a palace, where we celebrate, we mourn, we rejoice, we do everything. And we're building a community. This building is useless without the community. And when we raised the money, the building was, the whole building was, I sat down with my board members and said, hey guys, if we go straight to the building, it will take 3 years to build a building. Why don't we build and start small? Use that as a metrics and prototype to build a bigger building. And whilst in that process, I've learned a lot. So the building you see might be completely different. It's fine, we'll build a building. But the building is not the goal. The people is the goal, right? Whether we build a building or we don't, the number of people we will make impact here, all of us, right? Volunteering. And again, the can is divided into sessions. We're going to have fellowship, we're going to have workshops, we're going to have teen academy. We've partnered with schools around the street. My good friend Amwako Boafo is across the street. He's launching his place tonight. So after here, you can pass by. It's along the street as well. And we're building a community in a place where all of us can come and belong. If you have a project, bring it up. If you need a space, this is what I can do to support you. A young person like I was. So that's the trajectory.
Lovely, very inspiring. And maybe in the last 10 minutes or so, we can take a few questions before we bring it all home. Thank you all for your patience. I've been enjoying myself a lot. I hope you all have too.
Mind about is how I execute, right? And how I treat people and how I take care of people. I think in Ghana, right, sometimes it's very, very hard to find sometimes the right people to support the vision. So I don't expect people